Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is January 28th, 2023, Saturday, January 28th, 2023. All right, and let's get going on this. Now, the first story that we've got is out of Eerie News, and it's titled Who Haunts White Rock Lake? One of the most famous apparitions is a hitchhiking white lady seen on the shore of White Rock Lake in Dallas, Texas. Who was she? And is she the only one who haunts this place? Bison herds once roamed across White Rock Valley, which is part of the Blackland Prairie. White Rock Lake, located in northeast Dallas, Texas, was formed after the White Rock Creek was dammed. The reservoir flooded over farms owned by the Cox and Daniel families who settled there in the 1830s and 1840s. The only thing left of the Cox and Daniel farms is the Cox Cemetery. The Daniel family fell on hard times, and the renovation funds contributed by the Cox family earned it a new name. Other pioneer families buried there are the Glovers, the Humbards, Lavenders, McComases, and Donegies. Approximately 500 people are interred there. The dam was completed in 1911, and through the years a bathhouse with a dancing pavilion next to it and boathouses were constructed. In 1935, the Civilian Conservation Corps built structures at Winfrey Point and planted hundreds of trees. During World War II, it was turned into a boot camp for 2 years. In 1944, it was a prisoner of war camp, which held over 400 German non-combatants who had served under Rommel and were captured in the North Africa campaign. People came to fish, swim, and boat on the reservoir, which spans a little over 1,000 acres. In 1952, swimming was banned. The Lady of White Rock Lake is an urban myth connected to the area, and like many tales of this type, she is described in different ways. In one instance, she is a 20-something girl wearing a 1930s era evening dress. The consensus is that she met her end in a night boating accident or a car accident. Cited as a lonely girl trudging along the roadside of East Lother Drive, she has to be taken to a house on Gaston Avenue. Sometime during the trip, she disappears, leaving only a wetness where she sat. She has also appeared on lake-fronting porches where she asked to use a telephone before disappearing. Another version describes her as a beautiful girl with short black hair wearing a wedding dress. She tells the driver who stopped for her that her name is Jill Walters and gives him the address of 720 Island Way, just 5 minutes from where he picked her up. At other times, it's an address on Gaston Avenue, a street that leads to the lake. She disappears, and the Good Samaritan who gave her a ride arrives at the address only to find out she drowned 2 years before at the lake, the day before she was to get married. Like many of these ghost stories, an alternate storyline is that she died when her ex-boyfriend drove off into the lake when she told him she was marrying another man. In 1943, Anne Clark, on behalf of the Texas Folklore Society publication Backwoods to Border, wrote the story The Ghost of White Rock. In this retelling, a young couple is parked on the shore of the lake. When they switch on the headlights, they see a young woman dressed in a sheer white wet dress walking towards them. She tells them her boat overturned and she must get home. The others are safe. The address she gives is in the town of Oak Cliff. However, before long she disappears, leaving only a wet seat. They go to the address she gave them, and a man tells them her daughter drowned 3 weeks before while sailing on White Rock Lake. And yet another version. The person living at the home tells the puzzled motorist they've described a woman who lived in the house many years before, but she drowned in the lake. In 1953, Frank X. Tolbert tells of a night when Guy Malloy, who was director of display for Neiman Marcus, is accompanied by his wife Josephine. They see a blonde girl standing on the beach. She asks them to be taken to Gaston Avenue. Suddenly she disappears, and when they come to the address, a man tells them his daughter died 2 years before when she fell off a pier at White Rock Lake. The story was later embellished where she was wearing a Neiman Marcus dress, but the original story had the girl dressed in a raincoat. Malloy had one of the first homes at White Rock Lake. Now, was the Lady of White Rock based in fact? It's not certain how far back the sightings of the White Lady go, but many believe it started in the 1930s. Here's some women that found sudden death or were quite unhappy when they were alive. In 1927, Hallie Enid Gaston 19, drowned in the lake after her boat capsized. It's worth noting her surname of Gaston. If she is the hitchhiking lady, was she telling the driver her name and not the street? In 1935, Louise Ford Davis drowned herself in the lake. She was married to Earl H. Davis, but the one who found her suicide note was her sister Esther Doyle, who called police within minutes of discovering the note. They sent 7 squad cars but found her bobbing in the water, and they could not resuscitate her. In November 1942, a fisherman found a coat and hat with a note pinned to them on the shore of the lake. The items belonged to Nora Rose Stone, 37, and she asked that a sister in Fort Worth be notified. Police dragged waters near the public boathouses in search of her body. Her relatives came to help police, and according to the newspapers, they said she had been in poor health recently and her husband was in the army. A day later, her corpse was recovered. Now the story had changed. There was no mention made of a husband, in the army or otherwise, and Stone was her maiden name. Her sister said she had recently returned from Washington because she had been in ill health. Later reports were that she was a stenographer working for the government who had a nervous breakdown. Her death certificate listed her as divorced. She had married Cleve Bowers McCormick in 1930. If there was an exact reason why she took her life, it was never revealed. Perhaps it had something to do with her ex-husband, Cleve. Cleve Bowers McCormick was born in 1892 in the small town of Zwolle, Louisiana. He married Pearl Richardson in 1912. By 1917, the marriage seemed to be over since he made the papers after he was sued for marriage annulment because he promised his fiancée a $2,000 diamond ring, among other things. Garnett McCormick, a picture theater cashier in Oklahoma, said her husband, a soldier at Fort Sill, had threatened her that if she failed to marry him, he would prosecute her and her family legally since he had procured a marriage license. She described him as, quote, eccentric and with a violent disposition, end quote. He told her that unless she would consent to marry him, he would kill her and himself. He also represented himself as a man of wealth and promised a diamond engagement ring. Later she found out he earned $33 a month as a soldier's salary and that he owned no property. She had not lived with him for the 3 months it took to procure the annulment. Cleve married the unhappy Nora Stone around 1930, and in the 1940 census they were still living together. Sometime after this, they divorced. In 1946, Elizabeth McCormick, wife number 4, divorced Cleve. Nothing is known about the circumstances, however, she was the one that petitioned it. His last marriage was to Martha Shaw. In 1954, he was found dead inside his car, parked near the Veterans Hospital. He was a watchman for a construction company, and it was determined he died from a heart attack. At first, it was suspected to be a suicide. He seemed an odd fellow, to say the least, and perhaps part of the ghost story that involves a vengeful boyfriend that refuses to end the relationship is based on him. Cleve McCormick had his own sad family history. His father, Johnny McCormick, a Sabine Parish marshal, was killed in a street duel in 1898 when he was 26 years old. This swath of Zwolle, Louisiana was known as No Man's Land, a haven for outlaws. He was attempting to arrest Nicanor Sepulveda, who was raising a disturbance. He resisted, pulled a pistol, and at close range shot McCormick in the stomach. The constable then pulled his pistol and fired 3 bullets into Sepulveda, killing him on the spot. But let's not lay all the hauntings at the feet of the lady. There might be more than one ghost there. In 1926, the year before Hallie Gaston drowned, Joseph Jaworski, the son of a prominent Waco family, was discovered floating under a pier at White Rock Lake. The 25-year-old engineer had been missing for 3 days. It was alluded that it was an accident, but since his father was a minister, a suicide could possibly have been covered up. In May 1929, 3 high school boys drowned in the lake after their boat overturned. They had been fishing. In 1941, the body of Louis David, a former convict, was found killed gangland style. Riddled with 5 shots, he was found near White Rock Lake. In 1948, Mrs. Maurice Moreau, 40, fell from a motorboat and drowned. She had clutched a life preserver thrown out to her, but then went under. In 1953, Russell Gardner, 21, drowned after jumping from his motorboat before it exploded. In 1964, Samuel C. Turney, 51, was recovered from White Rock Lake. Like Nora Stone, he left clothes, a wallet, and a note on the shore. That same year, a construction company foreman was killed when he fell beneath a tread tractor at a road project near White Rock Lake. He was 29 years old. The mystery of who is the lady might never be solved. And if not, she perhaps keeps good company from those that met their end at White Rock Lake, just like her. There you go. This is a very, very well known urban myth in Dallas. And a lot of people, besides those that I mentioned there, supposedly have had this encounter with her. And of course, it follows that typical hitchhiker ghost story that you hear about, like Resurrection Mary and things like that, where the girl, whatever, different description, hitchhiking, she gets a ride and then disappears or goes in and leaves something behind. It's one of those deals, and the driver, whoever it is, verifies either then or later that this girl is died recently or before. In some cases, she has to be taken to the drop off point. Her home is the gate, the entrance to the cemetery. So there you go. So on our next story, this is out of the Mirror, and it is titled "Chilling Bigfoot Abduction: Warning as Experts Brands Hidden Beast a Killing Machine." An expert issued a fresh warning against Bigfoot, claiming that the beast was a potential killing machine who could easily kill again if it was provoked. Expert Thomas Markham has branded Bigfoot a killing machine, stating there could be a possibility of abduction cases if the beast is provoked. Bigfoot, who is purported ape-like creature said to reside in the forest of North America, and there have been multiple sightings over the years. The Bigfoot expert explained to the newspaper that the beast, who is also known as Sasquatch, only attacks if someone comes too close. Although the creature could easily kill a man, it doesn't appear to happen as often as expected. Instead, Markham noted a handful of historical abductions that might have involved the beast. While some attacks have been carried out on brave Bigfoot hunters, it appears that the beast was provoked by those at the time, with a reported shooting noted by Markham as an outlier in these encounters. The Bigfoot expert said, without a doubt, a Bigfoot could easily kill a man if he wanted to. The size and strength would be unmatched by a human. But this would be a very rare event, in my opinion. While the potential is there that a Bigfoot could do human harm, it doesn't seem to be happening. There are a few historical reports of attacks, but most are only after someone shot at Bigfoot. While researchers are reporting more and more encounters with Bigfoot, Markham noted that if Bigfoot was a killing machine, they would never make it out. Of the abductions, the expert pointed to historical records for tales of Bigfoot abducting women of a Native American tribe. One of these encounters happened to a Canadian prospector called Albert Ostman, who Markham said was abducted by Sasquatch and held captive for 6 days. Markham added, as Ostman lay sleeping one evening, a Sasquatch purportedly picked him up and carried him off while he was in his sleeping bag. He found himself in the presence of several Sasquatch. He eventually made his escape by getting the Sasquatch to try some of his snuff. However, the Sasquatch expert noted that more modern cases, while potentially involving Bigfoot, cannot be jumped to as an example of a Bigfoot abduction. Last month, video footage of a beast that looked like Bigfoot was shared online, with viewers calling the clip crazy. Filmed in Tennessee, the video showed a huge black figure with extremely long arms moving through the trees. The witness who filmed the clip initially thought that the creature was one of his friends in a costume attempting to play a prank on him. When he realized that wasn't the case, he rushed inside to get his gun. He later returned to the spot and discovered that the beast had disappeared, and a short video was the only evidence he collected. The witness shared the video on social media, and soon they were inundated with comments from friends and Bigfoot fans. One said, what gets me is how he grabs one tree and then stretches the other arm to grab the other. I've heard of that before. Another person commented, that is crazy, real looking. No one has arms like that unless you're Stretch Armstrong. I think this is a wonderful catch. So, what do you think? Do you think that Bigfoot is a warm and fuzzy guy, ape, whatever? Do you think he's a terror? Or what do you think all those 411 disappearances in national parks might have a Bigfoot origin? I mean, why not? I mean, I'm sure everybody's thinking about that. You know, maybe they're hungry. Yeah, this is a big thing. If you look at the size of Bigfoot, they got to eat a lot to maintain the metabolism of such a big, you know, physical body. So I don't know. What can I say? Just food for thought. But anyway, this is out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and this is titled The Satanic Servants. 12 young people were being questioned by police either as witnesses or for involvement in the torture slaying of Kathleen Ann Gilbert, 17, a resident of Flint, Michigan. They ranged in age from 14 to 22 and were believed to be members of a group calling itself the Satanic Servants. Now, this occurred in November of 1971 in Michigan. Initially, the police dismissed reports that they were a religious cult. A cousin of one of the accused said the group was actually called the Satanical Angels, but they were a motorcycle club. Janet Lee Musser, 17, and Raymond Humble, 22, an unemployed Vietnam veteran, were arraigned in court on a charge of first-degree murder. Humble and another member, William Bowen, 17, were arraigned on separate charges of assault with intent to commit murder following a series of sniper attacks on 5 suburban Flint homes the Friday before. The authorities theorized the attacks were done to intimidate witnesses in the murder of Kathleen Gilbert. Gilbert was a runaway from her home and the girls' training school at Adrian. She was considered a problem child who ran away from her home in March of 1971. After this, she was placed in the training school from which she ran away in July. After this event, Gilbert's father and stepmother had made a missing persons report for her. Police determined Kathleen Gilbert was killed on October 19th. However, her nude, decomposed body was not discovered until several weeks later in a wooded marsh. The location was near a Flint gang's clubhouse, about 10 miles north of Howell. She'd been stabbed twice in the heart, slashed across the throat, and shot with a shotgun. A person who had witnessed the crime led authorities to the site. On November 8th, she was buried. The autopsy disclosed the girl's exact cause of death was a stab wound in the chest. Humble and Musser were held without bond. The state police were holding a 16-year-old girl and 3 juvenile boys in connection with the death. Ralph Burley, 29, was a cousin of Musser and roomed with Humble. He told police they were a motorcycle gang called the Satanical Angels. In a taped statement, Janet Musser alleged Humble shot and then stabbed Kathleen Gilbert. Her statement lasted 40 minutes. She said that Humble ordered gang members out of the cabin clubhouse. She said he sought revenge against Gilbert because she had given him a venereal disease. During the same tape disclosure, Musser described how 25 guys forced her 16-year-old sister to submit to a gang rape the day before. Humble threatened them both not to say anything to their mother about the rape. By November 11, 1971, the prosecutor charged Floyd Richmond, 17, with first-degree murder. Thomas Hammond, in a deal to receive immunity, testified that Humble and Musser stripped Gilbert in the cabin and tied her up with fishing line. He said he went outside and then heard a shot fired from inside. He said he and others were ordered to carry the girl who was still alive from the cabin to a marshy area nearby. On the way, Humble stabbed her, and another youth, then unidentified, slashed her throat. Later testimony described where before killing her, they had beaten her savagely and urinated on her. By December of 1972, the venue for the trials had been changed. 3 members of the Satanical Angels were the last to be sentenced. David L. Shaw, 19, and Donald J. Bentley, 18, were sentenced to 5 years probation in Livingston County. They had pled guilty to manslaughter. Floyd or Rickman, 18, was sentenced to 3 years probation with the first 6 months to be spent in jail. However, his term was pending the outcome of an AWOL charge against him by the U.S. Army. According to the judge, Pap, the reason she ordered probation was because she was giving them the benefit of the doubt because they had no previous arrest records. Part of their probation restricted them from mingling with other members of the Satanical Angels, and they had to live at home. Rickman, who had no immediate family, was placed in a state educational facility. John Reynolds and Vicky Stone, both juveniles, entered pleas of second-degree murder and were placed in a juvenile detention facility. One juvenile was still awaiting a hearing pending a state Supreme Court ruling on the procedure to try a youth as an adult. Janet Lee Musser, who was 17 when she participated in the murder, was already married and had a 21-month-old child. Despite a plea for insanity, she was sentenced to a life term at Southern Michigan State Prison. Raymond Humble also received the same sentence. They had been tried jointly. Later, Humble argued that the trial court abused its discretion in allowing a photograph of the victim's body as it was found in the swamp to be admitted into evidence and taken to the jury room by the jury during their deliberations. The photograph in question showed the naked torso, arms, and legs of the victim as she lay face down in a swampy area. Nature had mercifully allowed weeds to grow up around the head, thereby cloaking from view the work done by the shotgun blast. While anything but pleasant, the photograph could not really be called ghastly or gruesome. The story changed as to the motive for the murder. Another reason given was that it was done in retribution, since Gilbert had lured Janet Musser's sister to a location where she was gang raped by several members the day before she was killed. Kathleen Ann Gilbert was born on July 20th, 1954, to Gordon Wynne Gilbert, who died in 2006, and Emma Goodrich, who died in 2003. As of 2022, Raymond Leroy Humble is still serving his life sentence. The police tried to dismiss the reporting, which attracted occult motives for the murder. But at the same time, the true reason for the killing are murky. Was it a revenge for venereal disease, or for luring Musser's sister to be gang raped? It appears that Gilbert was part of this gang, or at the very least hung out with them. She'd been missing since July of 1971. Was her significance tied to the timing of the murder, which was less than 2 weeks before Halloween? So there you go. This is one of those weird old, when people were saying about satanic panic and the stories, but let's face it, there's these people were calling themselves satanic servants, satanical angels, and what they did was pretty horrible. And one of the things that I found interesting is how young all of these, the majority of them were, with the exception of this guy who was in his 20s and he had come back from Vietnam. They were all very young. So let's move on to the next story. This is out of Exemplar, and it's titled Paranormal Investigation Near Salton Sea, California Leads to Child Shoot. The name Esmeralda keeps coming up. A self-proclaimed psychic medium records her live paranormal investigation of an area near Salton Sea, California. She begins at a rocky outcropping where she says she's picking up something specific, a woman and 2 children. She claims she can see the spirits reenacting how they would hide from the rain under a little overhang and pointed out the area she says they are indicating they used as a fire pit. The name Esmeralda keeps coming to her. The camera jumps to a different area where a child's shoe pokes out of the sand, and the psychic says even she is freaked out by how eerily close it is to the site just up to here where she believes she was communicating with the ghostly spirit of the owner. She clarifies she believes the woman's name was Esmeralda and that she had a son and a daughter, and they would stay in a cave in this area. She asked an unidentified man if he knows if the area used to have more rain, and he said no. The area used to be underwater back in the day, and points out the salt line and types of rocks in the area, which he says are more like coral than rock. She backtracks and believes this explains the water she was seeing hitting the kids, despite her initial thought that it was rain. Is it time to whip out the old Ouija board and have a seance in this rocky outcropping? Or is this the sort of normal debris one finds in an area where children play and thus lose things? A kid's shoe, absolutely. Who knows? Who knows really, what, anything is possible, anything is possible. Sometimes things sound really weird and outlandish, and you're like, yeah, right. But sometimes, what's that saying? Truth is stranger than fiction. Okay, the next story is out of Daily Mail, and it's titled Mysterious Howl is Coming from the Golden Gate Bridge. Drivers are stunned by an eerie sound as they travel over the more than 1 mile long landmark in San Francisco. California's iconic Golden Gate Bridge is releasing a mysterious howl that pierces I can't imagine driving down this thing. That must be a trip. A mysterious howl that pierces through cars driving across the landmark and homes nearby. Social media users shared videos revealing an eerie sound from the bridge, which some claim they could hear the strange noises from miles away. The noise is caused by high winds blowing through a suicide deterrent rails added to the San Francisco Bridge in 2020. The new railing, which features thin slats, emanates the sounds when hit by winds more than 22 miles per hour, and the region experienced more than 28 mile per hour gusts this week. The Golden Gate Bridge District is working on a redesigned railing that would reduce the sound by 75%, and the first installation is expected to be completed in the first half of 2023. Initially, bridge officials said they did not know that the air rushing through the slats would release the loud tones under extreme conditions, but later they said they did know the bridge would create the sounds. Several videos have been shared on Twitter and YouTube by people who witnessed the ghostly sound as they crossed the more than 1 mile long bridge. For the A Twitter user took this trip on January 14th as a storm ripped through the area. Quote, "For the first time in my life, I heard the Golden Gate Bridge singing this morning, which is actually kind of creepy sounding and really only added to the terror of the super rainy commute." Another Twitter user had a similar experience, noting it was the first time he had heard the sound while crossing. "It's much louder and more disconcerting than in the video, but this whistling noise is what the Golden Gate Bridge sounds like in the rain and wind." Locals also endured the piercing noise, which led to the Golden Gate Bridge's $450,000 redesign project, which will see U-shaped clips attached to both edges of all 12,000 vertical slats on the newly installed west railing. On average, 30 people die from suicide at the Golden Gate Bridge each year. Hundreds more were stopped from harming themselves through the efforts of the Golden Gate Bridge District Patrol, California Highway Patrol, other law enforcement, and citizen intervention. State officials need a more efficient way of preventing people from jumping off the bridge, and that is when the railings were added. However, they did not think to test a railing in a wind tunnel. The proposed solution will be invisible to most bridge users and, importantly, will not affect the bridge structural stability during sustained high winds. The clips, which are just 1/8 of an inch thick, will cover the edge of every slat from top to bottom and include a thin rubber sleeve underneath to dampen vibrations who contribute to the sounds. Okay, interesting. You know, it's it's bad enough. It's bad enough that you hear this that noise coming off like that, but in the Golden Gate Bridge is a very well known suicide spot. Unfortunately, there have been people that have jumped and have survived, but from what I understand, part of the allure is on people sometimes that want to do themselves in, kind of romanticize the thought of doing it from the Golden Gate Bridge, just like when people jump off the Empire State Building. Like, it's not like I'm going to stay home or whatever. They kind of romanticize the event, and that's why it's been around in San Francisco and the Bay and the whole 9 yards, and yeah, and they choose that spot, so I understand why it is that they put those slats or whatever they are on. Okay, next story is out of IFL Science, and it's titled "Poor Sleep Linked to Paranormal Beliefs Around Aliens, Ghosts, and Demons." And you know what? It seems everybody has trouble sleeping lately. Everybody's taking, what was it, melatonin, NyQuil to sleep. A bunch now of these pain reliever medicines have a PM version. It's amazing how creepy the nighttime can be, so it's perhaps no surprise that people tend to experience more paranormal activity after lights out. According to new research, an inability to sleep well could make the night appear even more alive, leading to stronger beliefs in ghosts, demons, aliens, and the afterlife. A number of previous studies have linked such convictions to specific sleep disorders. These include sleep paralysis, which entails a temporary inability to move upon waking or falling asleep, and exploding head syndrome, characterized by hearing loud bangs while nodding off. Given that both these conditions are associated with hallucinatory phenomena, including the sudden appearance of shadowy figures by one's bedside, it's understandable that those who experience such somnolent mischief might be more inclined to believe in the paranormal. Indeed, such ideas are even encouraged by numerous cultural explanations for these sleep disorders. In Egypt, for instance, sleep paralysis is often said to be caused by a nefarious spirit called jinn, while some Italians blame the condition on an evil cat-like witch called Pandafesh. Taking a more scientific approach, the study authors analyzed the responses of 8,853 people to a survey about sleep quality and paranormal beliefs. In particular, they sought to determine how sleep impacts people's convictions regarding the existence of ghosts and demons, the continuation of the souls after death, and the possibility of aliens having already visited Earth. Overall, they found that such beliefs are more common among those who get fewer hours of sleep per night, take longer to fall asleep, struggle with insomnia, or report low sleep efficiency. Most strikingly, they found that around two-thirds of those who experienced sleep paralysis or exploding head syndrome were convinced that aliens had already walked amongst us, compared to just 3.4% of the total sample. Just under 60% of participants who had undergone sleep paralysis also said they thought near-death experiences prove that the soul lives on after death, while those with stronger insomnia symptoms were more likely to believe in the devil. As sleep paralysis involves different types of hallucinations, including auditory and visual, and exploding head syndrome typically involves a bang, our findings suggest that the belief in aliens may be associated with sleep disturbances that produce sounds or images, write the study's authors. One explanation for these associations is therefore that someone experiencing sounds or images associated with sleep could interpret this as evidence that aliens or other supernatural beings exist. Further research will be required to test this theory and examine the causal associations between sleep quality and paranormal beliefs. In the meantime, the researchers say their findings could help clinicians diagnose sleep disorders among patients who endorse such ideas. Ultimately, though, they say that the mechanisms underlying these associations are likely complex and need to be further explored to fully understand why people sometimes report things that go bump in the night. And this study appeared in the Journal of Sleep Research. And you know what? I agree that sometimes when you don't sleep or you have insomnia, you fall asleep, but then you wake up and you can't go back to sleep, or you can't fall asleep, period. Lack of sleep, this has been proven to be really, really bad for the human brain. Really bad. Especially even if you don't go into REM sleep. However, I've spoken to other people, and they say that sleep paralysis and the things that people see when they have sleep paralysis and all that, that it's just basically caused by your brain. I've spoken to quite a few people that say, I know what sleep paralysis is, or I know, and they've had really terrifying sightings of very horrific things, or sometimes shadow people, and they will swear up and down, this happened to me, and I wasn't asleep, I was wide awake. Maybe I couldn't move my body, or they would. So I don't know. That's up for debate as to is it all in your head kind of thing. And the last one is out of the Daily Mail, and it's titled "Mysterious Shipwreck Off the Coast of Eastbourne is Identified as a 17th Century Dutch Warship that sank while transporting slabs of fine Italian marble." Scientists have solved the mystery of the identity of a 17th century Dutch warship wrecked off the coast of England while carrying slabs of fine Italian marble. The unknown protected wreck off the coast of Sussex has been identified as the Dutch warship Klein Hollandia. Built in 1656 and owned by the Admiralty of Rotterdam, the ship was involved in all major battles in the Second Anglo-Dutch War, which lasted from 1665 to 1667. The wreck, which lies on the seabed 32 meters under the surface, was until now known as the unknown wreck off Eastbourne. Wow. The ship sank in 1672 and was discovered in 2019. It was considered so important that it was granted the highest level of protection the same year under the Protection of Wrecks Act in 1973. Over the past year, specialists from Historic England Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands and the Nautical Archaeology Society have been working on identifying the ship. They used evidence gathered from the wreck by a team of professional and volunteer divers, as well as archival research and tree ring analysis of the wood samples. Heritage Minister Lord Parkinson said the identification of the Klein Hollandia offers a glimpse back into the 17th century, giving us a chance to learn more about the maritime history of this period and to uncover treasures which have been underwater for hundreds of years. I am very pleased that thanks to this partnership between the UK and the Netherlands, we have been able to solve some of the mysteries linked to this wreck and to protect it for future generations to continue to research. Duncan Wilson, Chief Executive of Historic England, said, "We're delighted that Historic England's material scientists have played a part in solving the mystery of the shipwreck previously hidden identity." Uncovering the story of the warship Klein Hollandia opens up another fascinating chapter in the already rich shared maritime history between the UK and the Netherlands. The experts say the wreck's condition is remarkable and could offer a wealth of information about how 17th century Dutch ships were built and the activities of the warship during its final voyage. A large part of the wooden hull, cannons, Italian marble tiles, and pieces of Italian pottery were among the material found in the seabed. The marble tiles came from the Apuan Alps quarries close to Carrara in Italy and were conserved by Historic England archaeological conservators before the investigation started. The tiles were bound for the Netherlands and would have been used to build high-status homes. The wreck was discovered by Eastbourne dive operator David Ronan and reported to Historic England. Oh. Mr. Ronan and Mark Beatty Edwards are the licensees and have been investigating the wreck since its discovery. Mr. Beatty Edwards, chief executive of the Nautical Archaeological Society, said, "From our very first dive on the wreck back in April of 2019, we've been fascinated by the range of material on the seabed. The impressive amount of wooden hull structures, the ship's cannons, the beautifully cut marbles, as well as the pottery finds, all point towards this being a Dutch ship from the late 17th century coming back from Italy. And after 4 years of investigation and research, we can confidently identify the vessel." Except they don't say what happened. Was it a storm? I mean, she was fully laden. I wonder what caused her to go under. So anyway, here we are, end of the show, and I will be back with you soon with some more weird, eerie, and unusual stories. And until then, take care.